Tonight, Nightmare Narrative presents Nightmare Now, as we journey through space and time to uncover the monsters, the strange, the extraterrestrial, the paranormal, and the mind-boggling mysteries of the universe. So sit back, relax, and be scared on this episode of Nightmare Now, Spirit Voices.
So here I am at Yorktown, Virginia, a place known for war, death, and suffering. A place where I also recorded one of my first EVPs on this YouTube channel. This is where I recorded that unexplained sound that most paranormal researchers call electronic voice phenomenon, otherwise known as spirit voices.
Paranormal investigators claim that using a voice recorder, you can sometimes hear the voices of the dead. Since spirits no longer have a physical body, the theory goes that the spirit instead uses their energy to electronically manipulate sound into a form that resembles speech. Electronic voice phenomenon can be traced back to when Thomas Edison was quoted as saying, "If our personality survives, then it is strictly logical or scientific to assume that it retains memory, intellect, other faculties, and knowledge that we acquire on this earth. Therefore, if we can evolve an instrument so delicate as to be affected by our personality as it survives in the next life, such an instrument, when made available, ought to record something." After the invention of recording devices for music and speech in the early 1900s, people began to claim to hear the voices of spirits. In 1949, Marcello Bacchi of Italy began recording voices on his old tube radio, where people would come to talk with their dead relatives. Another account was Father Ernetti and Father Gemelli of Italy were recording their Gregorian chant on their magnetophone when it kept breaking. Exasperated, Father Gemelli looked up and asked his deceased father for help when a voice he claims to have been his father answered from the magnetophone saying, "Of course I shall help you. I am always with you." One of the most well-known EVP researchers of the 20th century was a Swedish opera singer, painter, and film producer named Fredrik Jurgensen. His interest in electronic voice phenomenon was sparked one day in 1959 when he recorded the sounds of birds singing in a forest. When he played the tape back, he heard a female voice say, "Friedrich, you are being watched. Friedel, my little Friedel, can you hear me?" It was the voice of his dead mother. Jurgensen went on to record many other voices over the next 4 years, and he published 2 books, Voices from the Universe and Radio Contact with the Dead. Dr. Konstantin Raudiv, a Latvian psychologist, heard of Jurgensen's experiments several years later. At first, he was skeptical, but then he tried the technique himself and wound up recording many voices, including that of his deceased mother. In the 1960s and 1970s, EVP became a popularized technique for any paranormal researcher.
Maybe this is what we have on this tape. And I'll play it to you now, and we'll see if film Hollingworth got anything like you were talking about.
The devices included radio oscillators, cassette recorders, hell, even people were using their televisions to hear a spirit voice through the staticky channels that made their own white noise. Today, you can see EVPs in popular culture like the movie White Noise, and the endless paranormal investigator shows that claim to have produced spirit voices. So now it is time to give examples of EVPs. Paranormal researchers and investigators, such as myself, have a very specific technique for listening for EVPs. We put ourselves in a quiet room with very little distraction so we can listen for the tiniest change in audio. We use quality headphones to pick up the quietest of sounds, and we listen to the ambient background noise like an air conditioner, clock, cars, people talking in the background, and we also listen to the people conducting the EVP session. Combined, this enables us to listen to the third layer of the recording, and that is where the spirit voices are. The sound of a spirit voice is different from a normal human voice that is in the room. The volume of it is low, but not off in the distance. It's what I describe as a loud whisper, as if the spirit is straining to be heard. I like to use the term EVP sort of like the term UFO. UFO does not necessarily mean that aliens are flying some spacecraft. No, it means that there is a flying object that is unidentifiable. I think of EVPs the same way. EVPs are not necessarily the voice of a dead person, but instead an unidentifiable sound that resembles speech or some other noise we associate with a living thing. But first, let's use this arbitrary classing system to identify the quality of the EVP. So firstly, we have Class C EVPs. These are often very soft and often indecipherable. These EVPs break the ambient consistent noise background and come into the forefront of your audio. Paranormal researchers listen for a sudden change in the recording. However, skeptics and believers alike can easily debunk most of the EVPs that fall into this category as a form of pareidolia, or hearing something that really isn't there. Here are some examples.
To be here? If you don't want us to be here, just tell us and we'll leave. If you don't want us to be here, just tell us and we'll leave. If you don't want us to be here, just tell us. If you don't want us to be here, just tell us.
The son was basically homebound, morbidly obese, basically homebound.
Then we have Class B EVPs. This is the category that most EVPs fall into. These voices are fairly loud and clear, and most of the time can be heard without headphones. It sounds like a distant echo of a person. This category is where some skeptics will say, "Oh yeah, I hear something, but that's not the voice of a dead person." But usually this class of EVP can be heard by almost everyone. Skeptics can then claim it to be a reasonable explanation, while believers will claim it to be none other than the voice of the spirits. Here are some examples of Class B EVPs.
I just noticed how loud the clocks are.
And I'm going to set the REM pod up.
Then, the ultimate class of EVP that any investigator will search most of their life for. Class A EVPs. These EVPs are incredibly rare. At this point, it damn near sounds like another person is in the room. These voices are very clear and easily understandable. Skeptics will say somehow you faked this. This is someone in the room with you, or the TV was on, or there was radio interference. A believer will point to this class of EVP as proof of the paranormal. So here is my one and only example of a Class A EVP.
This voice recorder is still on, okay? You can talk into it and I'm gonna head back upstairs. Voice recorder is still on, okay? You can talk into it and I'm gonna head back upstairs.
So what do skeptical people say about EVPs? Well, I have found an excellent YouTube channel called A Skeptical Human that does great videos on debunking the methods of ghost hunters and questioning the existence of spirits. Anton was incredibly gracious to allow me to use his video debunking ghost hunters, their equipment, tactics, and haunted houses, which the full video and channel is linked in the description below. In his video, I'm specifically looking at how he debunks EVPs. The first part, he talks about how modern technology can affect voice recorders and EMF readers.
Maybe the ghost of Mr. Gallagher truly is fascinated by this oil can, or maybe some fat guy next door is microwaving a burrito. Since there are so many possible sources of EMFs around these people, the idea that detecting them proves the existence of ghosts is downright laughable.
So, to be funny, in our most recent investigation with Virginia Paranormal Investigations, I set my voice recorder next to a microwave, and we tested the EMF field a microwave gives off.
Oh,
Right
jeez.
next to it.
That's 67, right?
How could there be so much difference?
Wow.
And then now it just went off. It went down to 0.
But I guess that just shows that the microwave, it doesn't give off, it gives off a strong field, but it's very close.
Yeah, because now I'm at 1.2
Yeah.
and it was like at 1.5.
Right, so it doesn't reach back here.
Right.
So it makes you wonder, like with the digital voice recorder, how's it gonna, you know what I mean? Like if the EMF detector isn't picking it up from that far away, why would the voice recorder?
We'll see. Because the voice recorder's on. I didn't put mine on. We'll see.
We'll see.
As you can see, microwaves typically only have a certain radius of EMF energy they give off. But I didn't care too much about that, as I was interested to see if something as simple as a microwave could give you a false EVP. And yeah, it did. Here it is.
So, according to some skeptics, because that microwave is on. So,
I am not claiming that this EVP is paranormal in any way. However, an irresponsible investigator would claim, look at this, proof of ghosts. No, calm down, that was just a microwave. And pareidolia made you hear what sounds like an old lady gasping. So let's move on to the rest of Anton's video.
But Anton, it's not just electromagnetic fields that they're detecting. Sometimes they'll capture audio recordings of them communicating with the ghost. Oftentimes, the recordings don't sound anything like what the ghost hunters interpret them as. A great example of this comes from that same episode of Paranormal Lockdown.
It's like the same thing we heard. I'll get you.
I'm sorry, but that sounded nothing like that. It was literally just an ambiguous chirp of audio. And somehow what this guy hears is, I'll get you. Listen to it again in isolation and tell me what you hear. This just doesn't sound like a meaningful piece of human or ghostly speech to me. This guy is just hearing what he wants to hear. Putting subtitles on the screen and playing it back several times is supposed to prime your brain in such a way that you agree with him, but isolating the audio and honestly listening to it makes clear that this guy is making a mountain out of a molehill. On another YouTube channel called Believe a Paranormal Experience, they make it seem like they're having an actual back and forth conversation with the spirits.
What was this place called, guys? What are we standing in? Does this say prison? Prison. My name is John. Can you tell me your name? Pam. Oh. Was a woman. Did you meet God when you died? Is there a heaven? Said yeah.
This is pretty much exactly how these conversations with the spirit world always go. They ask a question, pick up a severely distorted chunk of audio, and they read into this ambiguous audio some kind of meaningful answer to their question. The problem with this approach is that there are so many different ways you can interpret these snippets of audio. Let's look at another example from this video and I'll show you what I mean.
Are you a guard or are you an inmate? Inmate.
If they had asked a different question here, the audio is vague enough that they could morph it into a meaningful answer to that question as well. Here's what I mean by this. How many children do you have? What's your name? What is your favorite animal? The point is, it really doesn't matter what they pick up on the audio, because it tends to be so distorted and unclear that you could conveniently hear a meaningful answer to virtually any question that you ask. If you think about it, what they're doing is distorting already distorted audio. What year was I born? Oh my god, he said 1994. Clear as day. Notice also the many jump cuts that they do. There's no telling from this footage what % of questions yielded nothing of substance worth showing. For all we know, they could have been there for 2 hours to only get 2 minutes of usable footage. This is clearly a case of counting the hits and ignoring the misses. They're obviously not going to show us the many examples where the questions weren't answered, or where the alleged answer was unintelligible nonsense, or completely unrelated to the question at hand. I also want to know why the ghosts are only seemingly capable of providing such pitifully brief, barely audible answers to their questions. Doesn't that strike you as a little suspicious? Why can't the ghost have a full-on conversation with them, like, "Hey, what's up? My name's Chris. I'm the ghost that hangs out here. What you guys up to? How can I help?"
Anton absolutely makes fair points when he says the audio is ambiguous enough that the responses can fit almost any question. Using jump cuts where we only see the hits and don't see the misses, and why is it that spirits can only say simple words and phrases? I will be doing a separate video on the latter, but I decided to test the misses. If I go back to the places I caught the more clear EVPs, I should be able to recreate it, right? If those places are so-called incredibly haunted, then I should get another spirit voice no problem. So, take a look.
So here I am at the Nelson house. This is the exact same spot I was standing at when I captured the EVP. This type of EVP is something that we would call a Class B EVP. This is something that you can barely hear. It's sort of a slight whisper underneath your own voice or the ambient sound. So what I'm going to try to do is try to recreate the same thing that I got before by asking the same questions and by seeing if we can be able to get any sort of response. I'm going to set my voice recorder right here on the wall and face it outwards. So what I'm going to attempt now is we're going to leave the Nelson house and walk over to the path where the slaves came up. You can barely see it, but this is a road that leads from the water up to the street here, and then down that way, and it goes right past the Nelson house. So, back in colonial times, slaves would disembark from the ship out there on the water and would come up this same path and then walk down this street to be sold further down the road at auction. So this road has seen a lot of pain, and it has seen some death, with slaves who were not able to make it up this path after coming off the boat. So this could explain some of the EVPs that some people capture here in Yorktown. I'm cutting on the voice recorder, and I'm going to walk down this path. So this is the same path that slaves, merchants, anyone that came into Yorktown would come up. So there is a lot of emotions associated with this path. So I'm going to get to about right here and see if we can do an EVP session. So right now I'm on the path. I'm going to go ahead and use my voice recorder to see if we can record any spirit voices here. Right now it's just me. There's no other tourists around or any other people. There are some cars passing up the road up ahead. So that's the only background noise that you can be able to hear. So I'm going to ask a few questions and see if we can get a few responses.
So after listening back to about 45 minutes of audio between the Nelson House and Great Valley Road, there was absolutely nothing that I would consider to be paranormal. The next place I visited was my parents' basement in order to recreate my most clear EVP. I was dumb, and I filmed most of it at my chest, so I'll skip most of the uninteresting video. So I was standing in the same spot 9 years ago when I caught this EVP. These are the stairs that I was walking up when you hear me say, "Come on, Milo." Then after that, you hear a clear, what sounds like another person's voice saying, "That's his friend." First, what I'm going to do is do 10 minutes of an EVP session. I'm going to have the mic sense completely on high, and I'm going to have the noise cancel off. So if there's any ambient noises, we'll be able to hear it. So what I'll do is I'll listen to the ambient audio as I'm reviewing it, and I'll kind of rule out the air vent, the TV, my parents walking around, any other noises that there could possibly be, and try to find a noise that's in between that and myself. So I'm going to go ahead and start it with a 10-minute session on high, and I'm going to leave this recording so that way you guys can be able to see exactly what it is that I'm doing. My name is Will, and I've lived here for about 20 years, and the last time that I was here and did an EVP session like this, you said, "That's his friend." So what I want you to do now is communicate with me. Let me know that you're here. With this, I can be able to hear exactly what you're saying. If there's anyone here right now, please come to this.
and talk into it. I'm going to leave it sitting right here, just as I did 9 years ago. I'm going to give you the opportunity to tell me anything. It's my cat running into the back. So right now I don't really feel anything. I don't feel like I'm being watched. I don't feel like there's another presence in the room, as a lot of paranormal investigators might say. Spirits, when they interact with you, whether it's touching you or speaking into a voice recorder or doing anything that would seem paranormal, it only happens for a few seconds. There's maybe like a minute window long where they're able to interact. So usually when you start to feel a type of presence being here, that's when you'll start getting those types of responses, the type of activity. So right now I'm not really expecting to get anything. Okay, so I've been doing a voice recording down here for about 5 minutes with the settings on low. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to recreate what happened previously. I'm going to walk up these stairs. I'm going to let whoever is down here know that I'm going to head upstairs. They can talk into this voice recorder, okay? So if there are any spirits down here, I'm leaving this voice recorder right here on this paint can. So I'm going to head upstairs now. You can talk into it, say whatever you want. So I'm heading back down into the basement. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off.
After 20 minutes of audio in the basement, there was absolutely nothing that I would consider to be paranormal. In my opinion, there are more misses than hits. That's why ghost hunters stay at a location for anywhere from 2 to 8 hours at a time, just to maybe get 5 seconds of something that they would consider to be paranormal. Ever since I recorded that voice in my basement, I have been a firm believer in the paranormal. And there is no persuasion from a non-believer that will ever change my opinion. However, I do consider myself a skeptical believer. Believe it or not, people can lie. EVPs can be faked. EVPs can be explained in a rational way. Do I believe that the microwave EVP was the voice of a spirit? Absolutely not. Because the logical reasoning for it outweighs the paranormal reasoning. For me, the recording outside the Nelson house is an example of the paranormal outweighing the logical. Me and the other person did not hear anything that sounded like that EVP at the time. There were no other people, and no other things around us that could make that noise. So, in the absence of explanation, I resort to the paranormal as an explanation. Finally, in the instance of the voice in the basement, I see absolutely no logical explanation other than the presence of a being that does not live on this plane of existence. If you enjoyed this video, like it and please subscribe for the next Nightmare Now, where we learn about the science of ghosts. And remember guys, sleep well.